So, what are we here to do? We're here to talk about body fat, okay? And if we look up on the screen, we got a couple of pictures of what body fat actually looks like. You know, some people say, you know, I'm 10% body fat. Well, 10% body fat is really, really, really lean. And if you look, there's a big difference between typically men and women. Now, naturally, women are going to carry a lot more body fat than guys, and that all has evolutionary reasons. Sorry, but it's unfortunately just the way it's going to be. Not a lot of things we can do to change that. So, what we want to do first of all is let's look at body fat. Why do we actually carry it? What's the purpose of it? You know, when it comes to fat loss, a lot of people talk about this thing called ketosis. You know, I'm sure you hear about ketones and ketone bodies. So what are they and what do they do? And what's really important to understand is how does your body actually regulate body fat? So once we understand that, we can start to learn some of the tricks that allow us to maybe reduce a little bit of it. Okay, so really what's the purpose of it? Well, primarily it's an energy storage. If you look at the amount of body fat that people hold on average, it's about 40,000 calories worth of body fat, okay? If you look at women, they contain a lot more body fat, and typically women will contain enough body fat to basically survive for an entire 10-month period, which coincidentally is exactly how long you're pregnant for. Okay, so that's one of the big reasons why women carry a lot more body fat than guys do. When you look at the other sources of energy in our body, sugar is a big one in terms of glucose. We only store about 2,000 calories worth of that, and that's very, very fluctuating. Okay, so it's designed there to keep us in times of starvation. One of the big challenges we have with our society today is we don't enter starvation any longer. So we just keep storing it. The body wants to store it, and that's one of the reasons why it's so much easier to store it than it is to lose it. Okay, it also acts as insulation, keeps us warm in this northern climate, super important. And another big one is vitamin absorption. Vitamins A, D, E, and K can only be absorbed with fat. So one of the reasons you don't want to knock down your fat intake too far is it can cause a lot of other problems in your body, okay? So how is fat stored in the body? Well, it's stored as something called a triglyceride. I'm sure you've heard that term, triglycerides. And basically all that is a glycerol backbone with 3 fatty acids. That's the storage form of fat. Now, in order for you to actually burn body fat, what has to happen is those bonds have to be broken. So we have to have what's called a free fatty acid, and that's what circulates in our blood. That's available for energy. Okay, so free fatty acids can go one of 2 ways. They can either go into storage and add to our fat stores, or they can be burned for energy. Okay? So what's ketosis? Ketosis is when you got a high level of fatty acids. Okay, and your body will convert a fatty acid into something called a ketone. This is super important because a ketone is one of the few molecules that can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. If you need some more chairs, there's just some tucked up in the corner there. Okay, so glucose is the primary sugar or the primary fuel source for the brain, and it's what keeps us alive. It's one of the few things that can actually feed our nervous system. Ketones are the other thing that can cross the brain. Okay? So when your body is really low in terms of energy or calories, your body will release fatty acids. But in order for those to actually keep you alive, they have to be converted into ketones. And this is one of the things that people, and we'll talk a little bit about insulin and sugar later, but this is one of the things why people go into these ketogenic diets, is they're trying to blunt their insulin response and produce all these ketones. Okay? So, what are some of the challenges that we exist with excess body fat? Well, in addition to just feeling uncomfortable, there's a lot of other problems. There's increased risk of stress fractures, okay? Your bones can break as a result of the actual weight. Increased rates of stroke and cancers, okay? There's increased rates of organ failure, poor circulatory health. It's difficult to move. It's uncomfortable after a certain point. You gotta remember that fat is not an inert tissue. It produces hormones. It does a lot of things in our body, and it has an impact other than just visual and storage, okay? We used to think, and I say we collectively in terms of the research, we used to think it was just a storage, but actually it's quite very metabolically active, and it can really skew your body chemistry. So when we're looking at fat loss, there's basically 2 ways to lose fat. One, you can reduce the amount of fat cells that you have in your body. That's through liposuction. Okay? Up until the time of maturity, puberty, typically as you gain fat or as you lose fat, you increase or decrease the number of fat cells. Once you go through puberty, your number of fat cells become fixed. Okay, then after that, you can either increase or decrease the size of your fat cells. And the only way to really remove fat cells is through mechanical methods, which is liposuction. Okay? So that's one of the challenges that we have as a society with a lot of our children. Because as they're going through maturity, if somebody has a whole lot of fat cells, they're going to have a much higher propensity or much better at storing fat because they have a greater potential for storing fat. And it's going to put a lot of challenges as you get into adult life. All right? So if we look at our fat cell, okay, basically there's two doors or two ways to get in, and there's only one way to get out. So you can see our body is actually skewed towards storing fat. Why? Again, if you think about your body as your brain, and the whole purpose of everything outside of your brain is to simply keep your brain alive. So your brain doesn't care what you look like, your brain doesn't care how you move, all it wants to do is stay alive. It's going to sacrifice everything and do everything it can to provide the storage just in case so it can keep it alive. Kind of selfish that way. So the fat balance is really controlled by a whole bunch of hormones in our body. Okay, so our entrance hormones, the things that will promote fat storage, are things like insulin, cortisol, and extra carbohydrates and amino acids. Okay, amino acids is protein. Those things are all energy sources, and when they go extra above what we need, it's going to contribute to fat storage. On the other side are our exit hormones, things like growth hormone, epinephrine, glucagon, which is the exact opposite of insulin. Okay, our sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, they're going to help. And activated hormone sensitive lipase. That's that really important enzyme that's going to break that bond, which is going to allow those free fatty acids to become available for burning. Okay?
So if you're on something like birth control, how does that affect?
So absolutely, it's going to impact the hormone cycle. Okay? Because if you look at the way the female hormone cycle goes, as we begin to build up and get ready for pregnancy, as estrogen and progesterone goes up, you're actually going to increase the amount of fat storage, right? As you're getting ready, as your body's getting ready for pregnancy. As you begin to go down, it's going to allow it to release a little bit more. So when you interrupt that cycle, you can start to interrupt with that up and down. Now, in some people, it's going to actually have a very beneficial effect, depending on the peaks and troughs that you go through. In other people, you're going to lose some of that trough. So it's something it's very hard, very difficult to have a blanket answer, but that's definitely going to be the impact because it is going to impact your hormone levels, 100%. 100%. Okay?